My name is Emily. I'm 35 years old, and I'm here to tell you a story about my sister. It's a story about family, about betrayal, about misunderstanding, and about how sometimes the person who hurt you the most can end up needing you the most when everything falls apart. It's a story that spans years of silence and pain, culminating in a crisis where I was forced to confront the very person who had ghosted me completely. What happened between my sister and me was devastating. For years, she didn't speak to me. She didn't answer my calls. She acted like I didn't exist. It felt like a deliberate erasure, a profound act of rejection by someone who was supposed to be family. But then life threw her a curveball, a crisis so big it shook her world, and suddenly, the person she had pushed away was the only one standing by her side. It's a complicated story, full of hurt and unexpected turns. I want to share it with you today, every painful step and every difficult truth. Before I dive in, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let me know. Also, if you've ever felt shut out or misunderstood by someone close to you, hit that like button. It helps me know I'm not alone, and hopefully, this story can help you feel less alone too. And please, subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this. Stories about navigating the messy, complicated world of family and finding your own strength within it. Okay, let's go back to the beginning, or at least the beginning of the end of our relationship as I knew it. Sarah is my older sister by 3 years. Growing up, we had a typical sister dynamic, sometimes best friends, sometimes worst enemies. There was always an undercurrent of competition, mostly driven by her. She was always acutely aware of what I had, what I achieved, how others perceived me. If I got a good grade, she'd ask what mine was before telling me hers, which was invariably just slightly better, or she'd diminish mine if it was higher. If I got a compliment, she'd find a way to pivot the conversation to herself. Looking back now, with the perspective of time and therapy, I can see a lot of it stemmed from her own insecurities. Our parents, while they loved us both, handled us differently. My father was proud of academic or conventional achievements, and I was a naturally good student. My mother was more focused on appearances and social standing, and Sarah was better at navigating those waters, more outwardly charming. We each sought validation in different ways, and I think Sarah felt like she had to constantly jockey for position, especially with our father, who I perhaps connected with more easily through shared interests and academic discussions. This dynamic created a subtle but persistent tension. It wasn't overt fighting all the time, but a constant low hum of passive aggression and one-upmanship from her side. I, being younger and perhaps more naive, often didn't even fully grasp what was happening. I just knew I often felt slightly diminished or like my achievements weren't fully celebrated without a caveat. Things escalated in our late teens and early 20s. As we started navigating relationships, careers, and independent lives, the stakes felt higher. Sarah was always a bit more reckless, a bit more dramatic. She got into difficult relationships, made impulsive career changes, and often found herself in tricky situations. Whenever this happened, our parents would rush in to fix things, pouring their energy and often money into helping her. Meanwhile, I was more stable. I went to university, got a steady job, built a solid relationship with my boyfriend, Mark, who is now my husband. I was navigating early adulthood with relative calm. This, I think, became another point of contention for Sarah. My stability seemed to highlight her instability, and instead of inspiring her, it seemed to breed resentment. She started making subtle digs about my choices. My job was boring. My relationship was too predictable. My life was safe, implying it wasn't exciting or meaningful. At family gatherings, she'd tell anecdotes that subtly painted me in a less favorable light, often twisting something innocuous I'd said or done to make me seem uptight or judgmental. Our parents often didn't notice, or they'd laugh it off as sisterly teasing, but it stung. It felt like a slow chipping away at my character within the family unit. The first major rift happened when I was 25. I was considering a job offer that would require me to move about 4 hours away. It was a great opportunity, a step up in my career, and Mark and I were excited about the prospect of a new city. I told my family, thinking they would be happy for me. My parents were initially supportive, though a bit sad about the distance. Sarah's reaction, however, was baffling. She immediately started listing all the reasons it was a terrible idea. The city was dangerous. The cost of living was too high, it wasn't. The company was probably unstable. She didn't just express concern. She actively tried to discourage me, listing absurd scenarios. It felt like she didn't want me to succeed or to move forward in my life. I tried to talk to her about it, to understand her resistance. I thought maybe she was worried about me, or about us not being close anymore. But her reasons felt hollow, like excuses. The more I talked about my excitement, the more negative she became. It reached a point where I felt like I couldn't even share good news with her without it being met with a dark cloud. I decided to take the job anyway. It was the right decision for me and for Mark. The move was stressful, as moves always are, but we settled in well. I kept in touch with my parents, calling regularly, visiting when I could. My relationship with Sarah, however, became even more strained. Our calls were shorter, her tone more distant. She rarely initiated contact. When we did talk, she'd steer the conversation back to herself, her problems, her dramas. If I tried to share something about my new life, she'd often interrupt or change the subject. This is when the ghosting began in earnest, though it wasn't yet complete. She would take days to respond to texts, sometimes weeks. Calls would go unanswered, and she wouldn't call back. She'd make vague excuses. "Oh, I was so busy," or "my phone died, it was frustrating," but I told myself she was just going through a phase, that she was busy with her own life. I kept making the effort because she was my sister and I loved her, despite the difficulties. The real catalyst, the event that triggered the years of complete silence, happened 2 years later, when I was 27. It involved a significant family issue, something sensitive regarding our extended family, and a small inheritance. Without going into too much detail, there was a disagreement about how things should be handled, and it split the family. It was a stressful, emotional time. Sarah and I found ourselves on different sides of the argument, not necessarily because we had fundamentally different views on the inheritance itself, but because we had different allegiances within the family. I felt strongly about standing up for someone I believed was being treated unfairly. Sarah, however, aligned herself with the more dominant, louder voices in the family, perhaps seeing it as a way to gain favor or avoid conflict for herself. We had a few tense conversations about it over the phone. I tried to explain my perspective, why I felt it was a matter of principle and fairness. She dismissed my feelings, calling me naive and idealistic. She said I was making things unnecessarily difficult, that I should just go along with the majority to keep the peace. The breaking point came during a conference call with several family members, including our parents and some aunts and uncles, to discuss the issue. I was trying to calmly state my case, presenting the facts as I saw them and explaining my reasoning. Suddenly, Sarah interrupted me, not to argue my points, but to attack my character. She accused me of being selfish, of only caring about the money, which was absolutely not true. It was about fairness. And worst of all, she brought up something deeply personal, a past mistake I had made years ago in my early 20s, something she had promised to keep private. She twisted it, misrepresented it, and used it in front of everyone to undermine my credibility and make me look bad. I was blindsided, not only by the public betrayal of trust, but by the sheer malice behind it. It wasn't just a disagreement. It was a calculated attack designed to humiliate me and invalidate everything I was saying. In that moment, the years of subtle digs, the passive aggression, the resentment, it all coalesced into this one brutal act. I remember feeling the blood drain from my face. My voice shook as I tried to respond, but I was too stunned, too hurt. The conversation dissolved into chaos, with other family members jumping in, some defending Sarah, some trying to mediate, others just sounding shocked. Our parents didn't shut Sarah down immediately. They seemed flustered, unsure how to handle it, which felt like a passive endorsement of her behavior. I ended the call shortly after, shaking and in tears. I called Mark, who was furious on my behalf. He had witnessed the years of strain and recognized Sarah's patterns. After that call, I tried to reach out to Sarah. I wrote her a long email, trying to explain how much she had hurt me, how betrayed I felt by her using something so personal and twisting it like that. I said I understood we could disagree, but that her tactics were cruel and unacceptable. I told her I needed an apology and some space to process what had happened. She didn't respond to the email. I waited and waited. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. I sent a couple of texts, just checking in, hoping for a bridge. Silence. I tried calling. My calls went straight to voicemail. After a while, I stopped trying. The silence was deafening. It felt intentional, punitive. She wasn't just disagreeing with me. She was cutting me off completely. This was the beginning of the long ghosting period. For the next several years, Sarah and I had virtually no contact. She didn't attend family events I was at. If we were in the same room by chance at a large gathering, she would avoid eye contact and not speak to me. She didn't acknowledge my birthday, Christmas, or any other holidays. It was as if I had ceased to exist in her world. It hurt deeply. It's one thing to have a strained relationship, another entirely to be actively erased by your own sister. There were moments I questioned myself relentlessly. Had I really been that bad? Had I misunderstood something? I replayed the conference call over and over, dissecting every word. But the truth was, her actions were inexcusable. Using a private vulnerability against me in public was a clear violation of trust and a deliberate attempt to harm my reputation within the family. During this time, I talked a lot with Mark. He was my rock. He validated my feelings, reminded me that her behavior was a reflection of her, not me. I also started seeing a therapist. It was incredibly helpful to have a neutral third party to talk through the complex emotions, the hurt, the anger, the confusion, the grief over the loss of the relationship I thought I had, or hoped to have, with my sister. My therapist helped me understand the dynamics at play, particularly the triangulation and manipulation that had been present for years. She helped me see that Sarah's actions, while hurtful, likely stemmed from her own deep-seated issues: insecurity, a need for control, perhaps even envy. This didn't excuse her behavior, but it helped me frame it in a way that wasn't solely about my perceived failings. She also helped me work on setting boundaries, even with family members who weren't respecting them. While I couldn't force Sarah to talk to me, I could control my own reactions and how I allowed her absence to impact me. I focused on building my own life, nurturing my healthy relationships, and finding happiness independent of my strained family ties. My relationship with my parents during this time was complicated. They were aware of the estrangement, of course, but they struggled to navigate it. They would sometimes try to mediate, but their efforts often felt clumsy or biased towards Sarah. They would say things like, "She's just going through a tough time," or "You know how she is," which felt like they were excusing her behavior and minimizing my pain. There were times they subtly pressured me to be the bigger person, to reach out again, despite Sarah's persistent silence. It felt unfair, like the burden of fixing the broken relationship was entirely on me, the one who had been wronged. I had to set boundaries with them too, explaining that I was open to talking to Sarah if she initiated contact or was willing to acknowledge the hurt she caused, but I wouldn't keep chasing someone who was actively running away from me. This sometimes led to tension with my parents, as they just wanted peace in the family, and my refusal to rug sweep felt like I was disrupting that. But I held firm. I had learned the hard way that my emotional well-being was important, and I couldn't sacrifice it for the sake of a superficial peace that required me to ignore years of hurt. I continued to visit them, call them, and maintain my relationship with them separately from Sarah. It was a difficult balance, navigating family gatherings where her absence was a palpable presence, or hearing updates about her life secondhand, feeling like a distant relative rather than a sister. Years passed like this. I focused on my career, Mark and I got married, we bought a house. My life moved forward. The acute pain of the estrangement eventually dulled into a chronic ache, a quiet sadness that my sister wasn't a part of my life, that the relationship we once had, however flawed, was gone. There was a sense of acceptance, a resignation that this was how things were now. I stopped expecting reconciliation. I had built a life where her absence was the norm. Then, about 3 years ago, when I was 32, I got a call from my mother. Her voice was shaky, filled with panic. She told me Sarah had been in a serious accident, a car crash. She was badly injured in the hospital, and it was serious. My immediate reaction wasn't complicated by years of resentment. It was pure shock and concern. Despite everything, she was my sister. I felt a surge of worry for her safety and well-being. I asked my mother for details, which were scarce and fragmented through her distress. Sarah was alone in the hospital, needing someone there. My parents lived further away and were struggling to make arrangements to get to the hospital quickly. They were older and less able to drop everything and travel immediately. Sarah, it turned out, didn't have a network of close friends nearby who could rush to her side in a crisis of this magnitude. Her turbulent life choices meant her relationships were often transient or strained. My mother, through tears, asked if I could go. The hospital was in a city about a 3-hour drive from where I lived now, closer for me than for our parents. There was a hesitation on both our parts. The unspoken history hung heavy in the air. My mother knew the years of silence, the pain Sarah had caused me. Asking me to be the one to go to her side felt like a monumental request. But what do you do in a moment like that? Someone is in critical condition. They are family. Despite the years of hurt, the deep betrayal, the anger I had processed and mostly come to terms with, the human response, the sisterly instinct buried deep down, kicked in. I didn't hesitate for long. Yes, I said. Yes, I'll go. Tell me where she is. Mark was immediately supportive. He helped me pack a bag, made sure I had gas in the car, and told me to call him as soon as I got there. He understood the complex emotional weight of what I was about to do, but he also knew I couldn't just stand by. The drive felt surreal. 3 hours of silence, my thoughts a whirlwind of the past and the uncertain present. I thought about Sarah as a child, us playing together, sharing secrets. I thought about the teenage arguments, the adult estrangement, the cold silence. I thought about her in a hospital bed, injured and alone. The narrative I had built in my head about her, the one that had helped me move on, the careless, hurtful sister, felt incomplete now. Crisis has a way of stripping away the layers, leaving only raw vulnerability. When I arrived at the hospital, the air was thick with the sterile smell of disinfectant and the low hum of medical equipment. I found Sarah's room. She was conscious, but heavily sedated, bandaged in several places, hooked up to monitors and tubes. She looked frail and small in the large hospital bed, so unlike the often loud and assertive person I remembered. She registered my presence slowly. Her eyes, clouded with pain and medication, widened slightly. For a moment, I saw a flicker of surprise, maybe even shame, cross her face. I didn't say anything about the past. There was no room for it in that sterile, serious space. I just pulled up a chair and sat beside her bed. "Hi, Sarah," I said softly. "I'm here." Her response was a weak, "Emily?" Her voice was raspy, barely a whisper. "Yeah, it's me," I said. "Mom called." I came as fast as I could. She didn't say anything else for a while, just looked at me. I sat there, feeling awkward but also resolute. I was here to help, not to dredge up the past. Over the next few days, I stayed by her side as much as I could. I talked to the doctors, got updates on her condition, relayed information to my worried parents. I helped the nurses when Sarah needed something, made sure she was comfortable. I was the point person, the family representative on the ground, navigating the confusing world of hospital bureaucracy and medical jargon. My parents arrived a couple of days later, relieved I was there and able to handle things. Being in that role, the one who was present and capable, felt strange. For years, I had been the one she had rejected, the one on the outside. Now I was on the inside, the one needed. It highlighted the stark reality of her situation, that despite her outward confidence or whatever facade she maintained in her life, when a real crisis hit, her support system was thin. The person she had deliberately cut out was the one who showed up. We didn't have any deep, emotional conversations during those first few days. Sarah was in too much pain, too medicated. Our interactions were practical. Can you get me some water? Or, what did the doctor say? But simply being there consistently seemed to have an effect on her. The initial surprise in her eyes faded, replaced by a quiet acceptance, maybe even a flicker of gratitude. As she started to recover slightly, and the stronger pain medication was reduced, she became more aware. The physical pain was still there, but the mental fog began to lift. This is when the awkwardness of our years of silence started to creep into the room. There were long stretches of silence where neither of us knew what to say. The elephant in the room wasn't just the car accident. It was the chasm that had grown between us, the years of hurt and unspoken words. I didn't bring it up. I was there for her physical recovery and immediate needs. I felt it was up to her if she chose to address the past. One afternoon, maybe a week into her hospital stay, she was feeling a bit better, sitting up in bed, eating solid food. My parents had gone back home temporarily, and I was alone with her. The television was on low, but neither of us was watching it. She cleared her throat. "Emily," she said, her voice still a bit weak, but clearer than before. "Yeah," I replied, turning to look at her. She hesitated, fiddled with the edge of the hospital blanket. I appreciate you being here." It was simple, understated, but it felt significant. It was the first acknowledgement of my presence and help that went beyond a simple request. "Of course, Sarah," I said. "You're my sister. I wasn't going to not be here." Another pause. She looked down at her hands. I haven't been a very good sister, have I?" This was it. The door was open just a crack. My heart rate picked up slightly. This was the moment I had sometimes fantasized about, sometimes dreaded. How honest could I be? How much of the years of pain could I express without overwhelming her or jeopardizing the fragile truce? I took a deep breath. "No, Sarah," I said, choosing my words carefully, trying to keep my tone calm and not accusatory but firm. "You haven't been. The last few years have been incredibly difficult. Being cut off, feeling like I didn't exist, it hurt more than I can easily explain." I saw her wince slightly, whether from physical pain or my words. I wasn't sure. "I know," she whispered. I messed up. I messed up a lot of things." This wasn't the detailed apology I might have once craved, the unpacking of every hurtful incident. But it was an admission, an acknowledgement of the harm she had caused. It felt like a tiny thread of connection after years of emptiness. "Why, Sarah?" I asked, the question coming out before I could stop it. It was the question that had haunted me for years. "Why did you just stop? Stop talking to me? After that call?" She looked up, her eyes meeting mine. There was a vulnerability there I hadn't seen in a long time, maybe ever. "I was angry," she said softly, "and scared. And I was ashamed of what I did on that call. Using what I knew about you, it was awful. I knew it the second I said it. This was a revelation. I had assumed her silence was indifference, a lack of care. The idea that it might have stemmed from shame and not knowing how to fix it was different. "So, you just shut down?" I asked, trying to understand. "I didn't know how to fix it," she admitted. The more time passed, the harder it got. I was embarrassed. "I thought you hated me. And honestly, my life was kind of a mess back then. I was dealing with a lot. It felt easier just to avoid it all, avoid you, than to face what I'd done and face to everything else." Her explanation wasn't a full justification, and it didn't erase the pain of the years of silence. But it provided a different lens. It wasn't just malice, it was also cowardice, shame, and her own struggles. It didn't make the hurt disappear, but it made her seem less like a two-dimensional villain and more like a flawed, hurting person who had made terrible choices. "It wasn't easy for me either, Sarah," I said, my voice still steady, trying to understand why my own sister wouldn't speak to me. "It really impacted me. I had to do a lot of work to process it, to move on." "I know," she said again, her voice heavy with regret. I saw your life from a distance through mom and dad. You seemed happy, successful. It made me feel worse about myself and worse about what I'd done. This conversation was difficult, painful even, but it was necessary. It wasn't a dramatic, tearful reconciliation with hugs and declarations of eternal love. It was quiet, hesitant, filled with the weight of history. But it was real. It was the first time in years we had spoken honestly about the rift. Over the remaining days of her hospital stay and the subsequent weeks as she moved to a rehabilitation facility, I continued to be there. My parents were present too, but given my proximity and ability to work remotely, I was still the primary point person for appointments, logistics, and day-to-day support. During this time, our relationship started to cautiously rebuild, but on entirely new terms. The power dynamic had shifted. I was no longer the younger sister trying to gain her approval or chasing her attention. I was the capable one, the one providing support. And she was the one who was vulnerable, who needed help. We talked more. Not just about her recovery, but about life. She shared some of the difficulties she had been facing during the years she had ghosted me. Financial struggles, relationship breakdowns, feelings of being lost. Hearing about her challenges helped me understand the context of her actions, though again, it didn't excuse them. It painted a picture of someone spiraling, and unfortunately, I had been one of the people she pushed away in her descent. I, in turn, shared aspects of my life, my marriage, my work, my friends. I was careful about what I shared, protecting my peace and not oversharing in a way that could invite old patterns of comparison or resentment. I maintained boundaries. I helped her with practical matters, but I didn't offer emotional support that felt like I was becoming her therapist or sole confidant in a way that would drain me. I was there as a supportive sister, but not as a doormat or a savior. We never had another single, dramatic confrontation that healed everything. The process was more gradual, built on small interactions, moments of shared vulnerability, and a cautious testing of the waters. The initial conversation in the hospital was the catalyst, the opening that allowed for a new kind of dialogue. As Sarah recovered and became more independent, my direct involvement lessened naturally. She had to rebuild her own life, her own support system. But the lines of communication stayed open, tentatively at first. We started with occasional texts, then short phone calls. We acknowledged birthdays and holidays again. The relationship isn't what it was, or what I might have once wished it could be. The years of silence and the pain of the betrayal left scars. Trust is a fragile thing, and rebuilding it after it's been shattered takes time, and perhaps it's never fully restored to its original state. There are still moments of awkwardness, times when I feel a flicker of the old resentment, or when I perceive a hint of the old defensiveness or competition from her. But there is also something new. There is a quiet respect, a mutual understanding born from crisis and vulnerability. She saw that I showed up for her when others didn't or couldn't. I saw a side of her that was broken and scared, not just entitled or hurtful. Our parents were relieved to see us interacting again. They seemed to gain a better understanding of the depth of the estrangement and the hurt involved, although they never fully acknowledged their own role in enabling some of the dynamics that contributed to it. But the focus wasn't on blame anymore. It was on navigating the present. Today, Sarah and I have a relationship. It's not the effortless closeness some sisters share. It requires conscious effort from both sides. We talk regularly, but not daily. We see each other at family gatherings and we interact warmly, though there's still a layer of formality that wasn't there when we were younger. We can talk about difficult things cautiously. The old patterns aren't entirely gone, but I am better equipped to recognize them and protect myself. Crucially, I have maintained my boundaries. I help her when I can, but I don't allow her problems to consume me or disrupt my own peace. I don't tolerate disrespectful behavior. If an interaction feels like it's veering into old, unhealthy territory, I will gently but firmly steer it back or end the conversation. This is the biggest difference. I am no longer the younger sister trying to appease or please. I am an adult woman who understands her worth and protects her energy. Sarah, for her part, seems to accept these boundaries. Perhaps the crisis humbled her, or perhaps simply getting older and facing significant challenges changed her perspective. She hasn't offered a grand, sweeping apology for the entire period of estrangement, but her actions and her occasional quiet acknowledgments feel more meaningful than forced words might. She expresses gratitude more readily. She listens more. It's a work in progress. Family relationships are rarely linear or easy. The path from deep hurt and estrangement to cautious connection was unexpected, paved by crisis. I wouldn't wish the circumstances of her accident on anyone, but I can't deny that it broke through years of entrenched silence and allowed for a different kind of beginning. I learned so much through this experience. I learned the importance of setting boundaries, even with family, and holding firm to them for your own well-being. I learned that holding on to anger is exhausting, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing past behavior. It means releasing the hold it has on you. I learned that people can change, or at least circumstances can force them to change, even if it's not in the way you expected. Most importantly, I learned about my own resilience and capacity for both protecting myself and showing compassion. I didn't go back to being the person I was before the estrangement, the one who allowed herself to be hurt repeatedly. I went back as the person I had become because of the estrangement, stronger, more self-aware, with clearer boundaries and a better understanding of healthy relationships. Becoming her ally in a crisis wasn't about pretending the past didn't happen. It was about making a choice in the present, a choice guided by compassion but grounded in my own strength and self-respect. It was about extending a hand without allowing myself to be pulled back into the quicksand of our old dynamic. The dynamic between sisters, especially those with a history like ours, is incredibly complex. There are layers of shared memories, rivalry, love, and sometimes deep pain. My story with Sarah is still unfolding, and I don't know exactly where it will go. But we are connected again, albeit in a new, more fragile way. And for now, that feels like enough. It's a powerful reminder that life can take unexpected turns, and sometimes healing or a new kind of connection can emerge from the most challenging circumstances. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but I hope it resonated with some of you. If you've been through something similar, dealing with family estrangement or navigating complex relationships, please share your experience in the comments below. It helps to know we're not alone in these struggles. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about personal growth, navigating difficult relationships, and finding strength in challenging times. And feel free to share this video if you think it might help someone else going through a similar situation. Remember to speak your truth and protect your peace. Thank you again for listening.